Caleb, can you hear me? Okay. Got a little nervous there for a second. Um, so thank you everybody for coming to another TA call. We really appreciate your attendance. So as Rachel just did, we are recording this call, and then we'll post the recording in the slides later on, so you guys will have access to them as a resource. So I wanted to start off with a date about next week's TA call. Um, so next week's TA call was going to focus on quarterly reporting, with the first quarter being in April. However, many of you won't be required to participate in that one because you have not executed your subgrants yet. So we've made the decision that we will do individual calls instead of a whole group TA call. So those of you that do have subgrants executed, our team will reach out to you to schedule a one-on-one time for you guys to talk about reporting and just guide you through that process. So if you have questions on that, please reach out to Diane and she'll help you out. So on today's agenda, we will start with a quick update on NTIA's tribal consultation efforts. And then we will have a presentation from Mariska Molnar from the Nebraska State Historic Preservation Office on Section 106 and that review process. And then Mariska will have a time for questions at the end of her presentation. She's not going to be able to stay for the whole call. And so if you have questions specifically about that piece, you'll want to make sure to ask them during that time. And then after Mariska jumps off, we will jump into the Nebraska Department of Water, Energy, and Environment's construction stormwater permit and the stormwater pollution prevention plan. And then we'll end the call with another Q&A session on those topics. And as always, you can put them in the chat and we'll make sure that they get answered at the end, or you can hold on to them and ask them live at the end. So I wanted to take a minute to remind everybody that we have the subgrantees resources page on our website that's full of a lot of helpful documents and guidance from our office about the NEPA process. And so be sure to look at that. It's also where we post the slides from the TA calls and the recordings of those. Quick update, we are updating our website, and so things are moving around and we're taking a lot of like old guidance documents and putting those into an archive page. And so things are starting to look a little bit different, but the subgrantee resources page is still under the NB tab, so you should still be able to find it. As a quick note, we will also continue to post guidance there even after these TA calls. And so I really encourage you to regularly check that out. We'll try to update you when we update the page or post some new guidance, but just in case, make sure to check back later for new guidance. So like I said, I wanted to start off with a quick update on NTIA's efforts. And so part of the Section 106 review includes consultation and coordination with tribal entities that have an interest in areas across the U.S. NTIA initiated the government-to-government consultation with the 24 tribal entities that have an interest in or across Nebraska. There were no responses or requests for coordination from any of those tribes. So for this part of Section 106, we're all good to move forward. There's nothing else expected of our office or of you guys as subgrantees. I do want to be clear a little bit here. This is not the same as the resolution of consent that's required for projects that are happening within tribe reservations. You still have to get that the resolution of consent if your project is taking place in a reservation. So again, if you have questions, just reach out to us. We're happy to talk about that, but we should be good. So on this next slide, there's a picture of the Ferguson House. I don't know how many of you know this, but that's where NBO is located. It's a historical home here in downtown Lincoln, right across from the Capitol. So this piece of NEPA, the Section 106 piece, is kind of near and dear to us because we live it every single day. So on that note, I would like to welcome Mariska Molnar from the Nebraska State Historic Preservation Office. So I will hand it over to you, Mariska.
Awesome. Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We're
Awesome.
good.
Okay. So I am the preservation archaeologist for the Nebraska State Historic Preservation Office. My name's Mariska Molnar. If you have any issues or questions, they come to me or our standing structure and compliance coordinator, Haley Rose. She normally gives this presentation. This is actually her slides. I kind of just stole them from her. Um, it's a great, nice overview of Section 106 review and compliance. We try to keep it as basic as possible so that you guys don't get kind of caught up in all the different kind of federal laws that we have to kind of sit with every day in our office. Um, so we can move on to the next slide. So Section 106 exists because we came together as a people in our nation and realized that things were changing very quickly and we needed to preserve what we have in order to be able to understand the past and protect it for our future. If you want to move on to the next slide. And I'm going to probably talk pretty fast just because I've already been in like 3 meetings this morning. So if anybody gets stuck on anything, just raise your hand. If you have any questions you want me to slow down, just let me know. So in 1966, that is when we initiated the NHPA, or the National Historic Preservation Act. It was established by Congress in order to preserve things originally within cities and along our highway routes. So we decided as a country that every state would have a SHPO. There are currently 59 SHPOs. There are more than one in a couple of territories. Sometimes we have to implement a separate SHPO office because of natural disasters. Like in North Carolina right now, we have 2 SHPOs and a third one just opened to help with the hurricane efforts. So SHPOs were established, and also the National Register of Historic Places, the NRHP, was established. If you work with SHPOs at all, you hear us talk about that constantly. That is our eligibility standard for whether or not a historic place or site is eligible to register on this National Register of Historic Places. It means that it has integrity, and it hits all 4 of our compliance standards, which we will talk about in a later slide. It is in order to help preserve famous people, famous places, stuff that can give us information in the future about how a city or a town or even indigenous peoples lived in the past. We also have a national tax credit program. Chris Usler is our tax credit program coordinator. He works with different companies to get some tax incentives, tax breaks, a little bit of relief in order to take care of their historic buildings. We work with TIPOs. I think you guys probably hear SHPO and TIPO quite a bit. TIPOs are a separate government entity that have all of the same government access and government ability as a SHPO. So technically we are government to government organizations. We don't necessarily work together all of the time. I wish we worked together all of the time. I love all of our TIPOs, especially in the Plain States. They're super nice, great to work with. They are going to be your leader for anything that has to do with any Indigenous, Native American type of site, burial, or culture context. We highly encourage always working with TIPOs if you're going to be doing any sort of ground disturbing work that could affect a site or it could affect a sacred place for them. They have all of the knowledge that any of us in the SHPO office could be lacking on Indigenous resources. They are great to talk to, and they will give you so much information you will come off of a call probably just exhausted and invited to some kind of powwow, and it's just amazing. So the last thing is the Section 106 reviews. That's what both Haley and I do here at the Nebraska State Historic Preservation Office. Anytime that you have a project that is undergoing either federal or sometimes for standing structures, state funding or permitting, you do have to come to our office and talk to us about that undertaking so that we can make sure that we are not affecting historic properties during the undertaking that you are implementing. So you can move on to the next slide. Let's see here. The NHPA is what we use to understand exactly what is needed for the SHPO to do. It gives us every single thing that laid out into several pages of what do we do if this happens? What do we do if this happens? Um, if we find a discovery while we're in an undertaking, it helps us. So a federal undertaking, like I said earlier, is a project that involves federal funding, federal land, federal license, or a federal permit. Uh, Most likely the federal permit that you're going to be working under is NEPA, which is the National Environmental Protection Act. We are a subset of NEPA. So it works with biology, environmental impacts, and also those cultural resources. Um, all companies, agencies, and their subgrantees have to consider potential effects of their undertakings on historic properties. We encourage that you guys contact SHPO as soon as possible, just because we have a 30-day review period. We may need more information than what you give us initially. We may require a survey. And also there is a pretty harsh line of if there is an adverse effect, we have to go into mitigation, and that can take some time. There isn't necessarily an end date timeline within that 30-day review period. Can you move on to the next slide, please? So the Section 106 review process is actually pretty simple, even though it can get kind of complicated, or it sounds like it might be complicated. So initially, we will receive a form, which is going to be on the next slide, from an applicant, and you're initiating the process. You're telling us what your undertaking is. You're going to tell us if you think it affects historic properties, if there's a property present. Um, if you already know about it, you're going to give us all the information that you have on it. That is your responsibility. So then we will go through and identify those historic properties and look at our records and kind of cross-check them with your records and make sure that we have all of the information we need. And then we will have an assessment of effects to those historic properties. Now, an assessment of effects is not the same as a determination of effect. We do not make determination of effects under NHPA. It is actually a part of the agency's job to make that determination of effects from an SOI, which is Secretary of the Interior standard employee. Um, you make those determinations. In our office, we are supposed to concur or not concur with those determinations. Sometimes when we don't concur, it is because we find that something is actually eligible if you might not have found it eligible. And then that is where we go into the resolution of an adverse effect. If we do find that it is an adverse effect, and that which means that your project will affect that historic property either visually or physically, then it will be your job to contact the ACHP, which is just one step above us at the national level, and ask them if they would like to join into the mitigation process. Can you move on to the next slide? I believe that it talks about it in that slide. Let's see, probably not. Oh, well, okay. I'll get there. um, so in the initiation of the review, this is kind of what I told you guys that you were going to be filling out and sending over to our office. It's all online. You don't have to fill it out by hand. You just go into this PDF. It's editable. You put in all of your information. You attach any pictures, maps, and extra information that you have. And in this form, we also have the question of, are there historic properties that are either below ground archaeological sites or standing structures? And you can just fill that all out. Normally, we don't need a ton of information at first, unless there are archaeological sites. Then that is where we're going to ask for more pictures, site forms if you have them, or if you have given it a site number if it doesn't already have one. Can you move on to the next slide, please? So if we do find resources within the APE of your project, we go into the review process of that historic property. Now, this criteria is for both standing structures and for archaeological sites. So the first thing we look at is what type of resource is it? Is it a farm? Is it a house? Is it a store? Is it an archaeological building, an old farmstead that's been destroyed? Is it an old well, an old dam, anything like that? Then we go to see if it's already existing in a historic district or is eligible to be a part of a historic district. Historic districts are a collection of historic properties that come together to create one eligible property, but aren't necessarily eligible on their own. So a great example of this is going to be in Omaha. The Farnham district is a historic district, and so is the Nicholas Street district, and it's a collection of buildings and cisterns and a dump site from an old landfill that all come together to create an eligible property. If it has an existing number, then we're going to look to see if it's already registered and eligible. If it's not, then we're going to go through the criteria, the 4 criteria, to determine if it is eligible. So we do that on our side, and you also do that on your side. So you're making the suggestions, and we're going through the criteria, and we're cross-referencing to see if we agree with that. Then we look to see if the area has been surveyed before. We want to know if there could be any other historic properties that are in the surrounding area, anything that can contribute, anything that is new that we didn't know of before, stuff like that. A lot of times with standing structures like farmhouses and homesteads. Very close by you can find indigenous sites. So we kind of go hand in hand with that. If it's a building or a site, it can sometimes not have any historic integrity left, even though the site is still there. Um, so that could be that it's a lithic scatter, but there's only like a couple of flakes and there's no like actual integrity showing us that it was like maybe a lithic site where they would make their arrowheads. Or if it's a building, if it's super dilapidated and doesn't have any integrity left, or if there's quite a few types of building left in the area of that specific type, sometimes they won't have that historic integrity. And then we also look at how the undertaking will affect anything that could qualify or is qualified for the National Register. Uh, that is something that is very hard for us to do in the end when we have lots of sites and districts and such. So that's where we really want to see that collaboration between the subgrantee and us, where we're talking about the possibility of something being eligible or not. All right, next slide. So after we come to the conclusion, there are a couple different things that can happen. If it's not listed or not eligible, you guys will receive a no historic properties affected sign off, which basically means you have the green light to do whatever you need to do in your project. If it is listed or eligible, we'll study the project plan and try to anticipate any effects on the property. Sometimes we have this no adverse effect or no adverse effect with conditions, which is generally where if it hits inside of a district, but it's not touching anything that's still standing. Maybe you're just tearing up a street in a district to replace it, then that's a no adverse effect. Sometimes we have no adverse effect with conditions where we tell you to use historic materials or historic adjacent materials that will not affect the integrity of a standing structure, or I'll give you personally a buffer around a historic site that's archaeological. And as long as you don't go inside of that buffer, you're not going to be destroying anything, and therefore you'll get a no adverse effect with conditions. And then there is the potential to have an adverse effect where unfortunately the pipeline goes right through a graveyard, or you want to destroy a historic building or move it to a different property. That's where we're going to get that adverse effect, which can affect its eligibility to be on the National Register of Historic Places. Okay, next slide. So this slide is mostly for standing structures. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit on both standing structures and archaeological sites. The Secretary of the Interior Standards, some of you may know this if you're an archaeologist or you work with archaeologists a lot. The Secretary of the Interior has a set of standards for how we evaluate and work within specific conjunctions of historic properties. I am a Secretary of the Interior qualified archaeologist. You will have to have an SOI qualified archaeologist if you are requested to do survey. You have to have an SOI qualified archaeologist or architectural historian in order to assess effects for a historic property. We have to have those people create that effect to stay within the NHPA standards in order to have an actual qualifying Section 106 review. The National Park Service is who we work with quite frequently. They have all set standards, quite a few quite a few resources for you to look through when you're doing an assessment of archaeological sites and standing structures. We take a lot of point from them in order to do our job, and a lot of SOI qualified individuals also work with them. Um, so there is also the the probability that there is like the scope of work, such as you are unable to use historic materials, or historic like materials for a standing structure, and that's where we're going to get this adverse effect that's in this last bullet point. If you have any questions about that, you can certainly reach out to Haley. I am not an architectural historian, so I have done very basic work in the realm of standing structures. Okay, next slide. So this slide just has a couple of examples of physical destruction, alteration, or moving of a historic resource to a new location. When you are doing any work to a historic property, you are setting up the possibility of it losing its integrity based on which criteria that it is considered eligible by. The movement of a historic property can cause it to lose its integrity because it's set in a specific historic district. If it was a part of a bungalow group, it could lose its integrity. If we are removing certain aspects of it, like replacing a bridge, then we're going on to that adverse effect of the bridge might not have been usable and we needed to replace it, but it was a historic registered bridge, and we have to go into that adverse effect of losing that historic property. Next slide, please. So adverse effects is not something that we look to issue. I've actually tried not to issue adverse effects. I think I've only issued one adverse effect, and it is within a large project that we just knew would have adverse effects. We try to work with you guys anytime you have the potential to have an adverse effect to get it down to a no adverse effect or a no adverse effect with conditions. We will work through a mitigation process. There is going to be a lot of give and take. We like to say, if no one's happy, we did it right. Unfortunately, we're not always going to be happy with the result of a mitigation process. It's not magic, it's mitigation. That's what we like to say. Um, so you are gonna, if you get issued an adverse effect, that is the initial finding. You will get a letter from us stating that you have been issued an adverse effect and that now you have to reach out to the ACHP, which is the Advisory Council of Historic Preservation, and ask them if they would like to be included in the mitigation process. Now, ACHP will probably answer within 2 weeks. They have up to 30 days to respond. They will most likely not want to be a part of the mitigation process, just because they are small staffed. They are national. They have bigger dogs that they have to deal with, unfortunately. So unless you have a 300-mile transmission line, and even then, they might not want to be involved in your process. So then you will come back to the SHPO, and you will work in coordination with the SHPO and or the ACHP and any other interested parties. So this could be TIPOs, if you have anything that includes Indigenous sites. The public sometimes has to be consulted with for projects. All of those kind of interested parties will be a part of the mitigation process. And once that mitigation process is complete and we find a good plan, maybe you're just doing documentation of a resource that's going to be destroyed. Maybe you're moving the line half a mile to the west so that it's not touching a site or destroying a building, whatever it may be, then we will write up a memorandum of agreement, an MOA, or a memorandum of understanding, which is an MOU. And those will be written and signed by the SHPO and the federal agency and their subgrantees as an agreement that you will be doing this specific laid out process in order to avoid an adverse effect. Next slide, please. And this just kind of goes through the process a little bit. Again, we are not trying to give adverse effects. This causes a lot of time and shifting back of undertakings of projects. So sometimes we try to go as quick as possible in those mitigations. A lot of times what we're looking for is creative benefits for the public. We are an agency for the public. We work to help and protect the public's their resources and their connection to their history and their culture. So a lot of times you'll give us your mitigation plan of what you wish to do in order to avoid these adverse effects or minimize them, go around them, that kind of thing, deal with it, mitigation. And then a lot of times SHPO will take it under review. We'll work together as an agency. There will be several of us. It will most likely include me, Haley, our standing structure coordinator, and also Michael Sothen, who is our deputy SHPO. We will work together to make sure that we are not missing any kind of effect that this project could have on historic properties, and we may come back with an agreement of your mitigation and minimization efforts, or we will come back with some suggestions of what we think would be appropriate for that specific project. We don't aim to go above and beyond what really needs to be done. What we ask is normally what we believe is fair or sometimes just above bare minimum to mitigate an adverse effect. So I'm going to have you go 2 slides forward. This is going to be the question segment, but I also have a glossary so that you guys can kind of look and see what the different kind of names that we have. I can't think of the word of them. Just some definitions in our glossary, and I will stop talking. Hopefully that wasn't too fast or too confusing. And if anybody has any questions, you can either unmute, put them in the chat, whatever you feel like doing, and I will answer them to the best of my ability.
There is nothing in the chat right now, so if anybody wants to come off mute, feel free.
I know that was a lot of information. We do have lots of resources on our website too, if you guys have any questions. And you're always welcome to give any of us a call or shoot us an email. We're always perfectly happy to work, even if you haven't put in a Section 106 consultation yet.
Okay. No, I think that was really helpful, Mariska. So thank you so much for coming on. Yes, Haley. Mariska, could you put you and Haley's contact information in the chat so that people can reach out?
Of course. Let me, so I will put
I
So
will
for
also let everybody know that the contact information that you will need will also be available in the guidance from NBO that is posted on the website. So you can also find it there, but Mariska can put it in here too.
So there are emails. And then I will give my phone number is much easier to give than Haley's phone number right now. Um, let's see. My phone number. These are our personal phones, our personal work phones. So it's a direct line to us. Um, so if you have any issues, any questions, anything like that, calling those specific numbers will get you directly to us. We do have a general line that goes to just the SHPO office. And Autumn will be answering that. But if we're in the office and you have a question for us, you can just ask for one of us or describe the type of issue that you're having, and we'll get you to the right person.
I will also say that our office is happy to help facilitate that communication as well. So if you don't get it written down today or can't find it later on, happy to make that connect via the office as well. So can help out that way too. So
It is also going to be listed on our website under our specific header. It gives a list of what we do and what our specific roles are. So if you're looking for that specific question, you can't really remember who does what, that will tell you what you need to know. You can email us, call us, and if we don't know the answer, we'll send you on to the person who probably does.
Marish, can I make one more ask? Can you put your website in the chat for everybody?
Of course I can.
Thank you.
This website, of course, this website will also, I'll give the direct SHPO website rather than just the Nebraska State Historic Society. We are listed, if you do ever get to like just the general history Nebraska, we are listed under services and then under historic preservation. There is a separate archaeology website because under the Nebraska State Historical Society is also our state archaeology office, which I do work with a little bit, but you guys don't necessarily have to work with them as much. They do all of the state required and the highway archaeology required surveys.
perfect. Well, thank you so much for jumping on and walking us through this process. I know it's a lot. So we just want to set our subgrantees up for success.
Yes, that is going to be what you submit. So you'll just submit it on the form. It says submit it to that NSHS section 106 at nebraska.gov. That email is, I have access to it. Haley has access to it. And also both Kelly, our grant worker and half section 106 archaeologist before I was here, and Michael, our DSHPO, have access to that email. So you will always get an answer. All right, well, if nobody has any other questions, I'm going to run to my meeting, and I will hopefully hear from you guys if you have any projects in. Thank you so much for having me on to talk about this.
Yep.
And
All
you
right.
guys have a good day.
Yep.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mariska.
We'll see you. We'll talk soon.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye. All right. So as you guys have questions on the SHPO and stuff from Mariska's presentation, please don't hesitate to reach out to our office. We're happy to help coordinate with her. So we will jump into talking about the next piece of today's slides. So I want to remind you, as I mentioned last week, there are some environmental permits that you will be required to get before you begin construction. We don't always ask about them directly in the NEPA form, but we still encourage you guys to mention them in those sections. And we will be asking about them during reporting. So you really want to make sure that you're staying on top of those as well. So as always, if you have questions, just give us a call, shoot us an email, whatever makes sense for you guys. So we are going to talk today about another one of those examples, the construction stormwater permit. So just like I talked last week about the Clean Water Act and the requirements at the federal level with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, today we'll look at the requirement at the state level with the Nebraska Department of Water, Energy, and Environment. The same way the Section 404 permits ensure you're following the Clean Water Act requirements at the federal level, the construction stormwater permits ensure compliance with the Clean Water Act at the state level. So that includes like construction deposits and those kinds of things. So the construction stormwater permit is required when construction activities will cause land disturbances of equal or greater value than 1 acre. It doesn't have to be continuous disruption. It could be throughout the entire project area. So some good examples of this are tree removal or adding several pole boxes throughout a project area. So there is going to be a new general permit available in November, but until then, the current version applies. When you need a construction stormwater permit, you will submit a notice of intent to DOE through their online service portal. You will need to include the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, the SWIP, that we'll talk about in a little bit, and your completed CERT review that we talked about during the Nebraska Game and Parks TA call a couple weeks ago. Once approved, you will receive authorization under a general permit for your project. And then permit coverage and requirements listed in the SWIP must be maintained throughout the duration of construction. So a SWIP lays out the steps and techniques that will be used to... Next slide, Rachel. Thank you. A SWIP lays out the steps and techniques that will be used to reduce pollutants and stormwater runoff leaving a construction site. SWIPs identify potential pollution sources on site that may come in contact with stormwater runoff. SWIPs also describe mitigation efforts such as silt fences that can be used to reduce pollutants in the site's stormwater runoff. SWIPs must be prepared by qualified personnel and should be kept on site at all times. So for inspections and compliance, in accordance with SWIP, you must complete routine site inspections throughout the life of the project. These will either need to be completed by you as the subgrantee and project owner or by the subcontractor you have on the project. Site inspections must occur at least once every 7 calendar days or once every 14 business days. And within 24 hours of occurrence of a storm, where you get at least 1/4 of an inch of snowfall, snowmelt, rainwater, whatever that looks like. SWIP documentation should be updated with changing site conditions and the results of each inspection. After completion of the project activities, a notice of termination can be submitted through the DOE online portal. Within the notice of intent, I mentioned that a minute ago, you will identify an estimated end date. The portal will then automatically prompt you to either submit your notice of termination or to submit an extension. The permit won't close until you have submitted your notice of termination. So in your notice of intent, in your NOI, give your best guess on when you think you'll be done with the project. If that date comes up and you're not finished, the portal will let you know that you can submit an extension at that time, and there's not any adverse effects for an extension. You just have to continue to let DWE know that you're still working on that project. So, like I said, when you submit your notice of termination, then they will begin to close out that permit for you. So, that is all I have about DWE and the construction stormwater permit. Since this is our last TA call, and specifically the last NEPA TA call, I wanted to remind you of a few things. You cannot begin the NEPA review process until you have executed your subgrants. So please be working with Diane on that documentation and getting those executed. After you execute your subgrants, we'll work with you to share access to the submittable form for the NEPA form. So we will work with you on that after you get those subgrants executed. We encourage you to start early. A lot of these processes can take time, and the NEPA review as a whole will take some time. And we just want to help you continue to get your projects moving. On that note, many of the pieces that we've talked about over the course of these calls, you can do at the same time. You don't have to strictly follow the order of the form. So for example, you could submit the Nebraska Game and Park CERT review and the SHPO review at the same time, instead of submitting the CERT review and then waiting 30 days and submitting the SHPO review, and then waiting another 30 days for the review to make its way through. By overlapping these requests, you should be able to shrink your total wait time. So happy to talk you guys through that. There's a lot of guidance on the website, and we're going to continue to post guidance there, but any questions you have, we're happy to answer. So with that, I will open a Q&A time. We've covered a lot in the last 5 weeks, and so happy to talk about any pieces of it, but specifically today with the SHPO review or with the construction stormwater permit process.
There is nothing new in the chat, so if people want to just come off mute if you have any questions, I'm sure Amber will be happy to answer everything you've ever wanted to know. Quiet group. Final parting words for our last TA call.
Yeah, just thank you for coming and for participating in these. It's been a lot of information that we've thrown at you guys, and so we really appreciate you attending and to just be listening and such. And so as always, and as I've said several times throughout these calls, please reach out to us with questions. If they're about permitting and the NEPA process specifically, please reach out to the admin inbox here. If they're about executing your subgrants and the documentations required there, or about grant management, I know Diane did a TA call on that a couple weeks ago. You're welcome to reach out to the grants inbox that typically Diane answers through. So we're really excited to get working on projects. So if there are no last questions, we'll give you a few minutes back to your day.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.